everyone. Thank you so much for coming out to our November 2nd District Community Meeting. And folks are still coming in. That's terrific. I can see one or two in the parking lot. But I thought we would just start by, we have a number of our neighborhood association leaders here. If you don't mind just standing and introducing yourself. And if you're not involved with your neighborhood association, it's such a great way to get to know your neighbors, both on your block and different parts of the neighborhood, and get involved in the city. I really enjoyed my time with the Fan District, so we will start with, who do I see first? Dante, you're standing. Will you introduce yourself and start Jackson Ward?
Good evening. My name is Dante McCutcheon, and I am the Vice President of the Historic Jackson Ward Association.
Yes, and we have Janice Allen.
Yeah, I'm Janice Allen, and I'm his wife.
Wonderful. So if you're in the Jackson Ward neighborhood, this is your neighborhood association. Grady, would you like to give a shout out for Rosedale?
Sure, thank you. Hi, Grady Hart with the Rosedale Civic Association. Just trying to learn from and really just emulate what Janice is doing. That's all it
I'll
is.
tell you later.
And then Jerome, Sir Jerome Regions. Will you introduce yourself for Carver Neighborhood Association?
Yes, Jerome Leaches, Carver Area Civic Improvement League, soon to be the ex-president. 8 years is more than enough.
Yeah.
Do we have anyone from the fan? Martha? Oh wait, who else? Sorry.
I just live in the band, so sorry.
Got it. Martha, are you still on the board or?
She is.
Excellent, okay. Well, we are just, we're introducing members of the different neighborhood associations so that people know who their neighborhood association is. They could come up to you afterwards. So Melissa, do you mind just saying hello?
My name is Melissa Sinico. I am the chair of the zoning committee for the FDA.
So Fan District Association. Did I miss anybody? Oh, thank you.
Kim Fuller, Vice President of the Fan District Association.
Excellent. And there is West Grace Street Neighborhood Association. We still have a little bit of Museum District in the second. Scott's Addition, obviously. Pretty much there's a little neighborhood association for everyone here. And you can find those on the website. You can also reach out to Spin and Ask. So with that, I wanted to introduce, we have two of our speakers here, and we're always a little bit flexible when we have guests because they usually are folks who have busy schedules and are doing other things. So I would like to start by welcoming Katie Ricard, who will be our incoming school board representative. Katie, do you mind coming up and saying hello? And welcome everyone who's watching this on YouTube later.
Hi guys, how are you? My name is Katie Ricard. I will be incoming as your school board representative in January. And wanted to take this moment, thank you Catherine, thank you Sven for inviting me to just give you a little bit of background about myself in case you missed it in the election cycle. But I have lived in Richmond for 10 years and I currently work at St. James's on Franklin Street near VCU as their director of youth ministry. But prior to that, I began as a history teacher in Massachusetts, became a dean of students, and then when we moved down here, I worked in Chesterfield at Monacan High School as an assistant principal for 6.5 years. And I found that work extremely rewarding. As my children were getting older, I have 3. My assistant principal schedule was not as flexible with theirs, and so that's why I took the job at St. James's. But I really missed working in public education and thinking about it, and that is why I decided to run. I was also PTA president of Fox during the fire and helped lead the community and teacher support during that time. So now I'm elected, and to tell you a little bit about myself, I do have 3 children. I have a 1st and 4th grader at Fox, and I have a 6th grader at St. Michael's Episcopal. I feel that that allows me to understand that as parents, we want what's best for our kids and that our children all need different things. And I would hope that our PS will continue its rise and be a school district for all our children. Things that I'm really excited about that are happening at Richmond Public Schools is continuing the rise of our standards of learning scores. So we increased our scores faster than the state average. We also had 8 newly accredited schools. Henrico and Chesterfield had none. So we're really increasing. Now, of course, there are new accreditation standards going in under Youngkin, which is going to impact how RPS's schools are accredited, but we're just going to kind of keep working towards that. But I'm excited that we are really focusing on all our 3rd graders having full literacy and being on grade level at 3rd grade. My 1st grader struggles with her reading and spelling. We were actually just at a literacy night at Fox, so I understand as a parent how it can feel when our children are struggling and the extra resources that are needed. I'm also very passionate about recruiting and retaining teachers. Some of our schools are still not fully staffed, and one of them is Carver. And so how can we make sure that our schools are getting highly qualified teachers, but also retaining them? Because that's actually what's concerning to me, that a lot of our first-year teachers come in and then they quickly exit. They don't even last the full year. So we're not supporting them in their building to make sure that they're feeling successful. And then finally, just supporting all our schools and our children's interests. So there are 4 schools in District 2. We have Dogwood Middle School, we have Fox, we have Carver, and we have the Richmond Success Academy. And all those schools are all very different and require very different things. And making sure that we're supporting each of them, talking to the principals, knowing what they need, and then creating a budget that supports them. A little side project of mine is I'm really passionate about career and technical education, and that is something I would love to see more at the middle and high school level, and I know that's something that the superintendent wants as well. So I just spoke an awful lot and probably way too quickly, but I also, if anyone had any questions, I would love to take them.
No, I didn't have a question.
I was ready. Come on, Joel.
I have his email, trust me.
Yeah, can I just say one more thing? Okay. So what I'll leave you with is please don't hesitate to reach out to me. I don't have an RPS email or phone yet, but you can still find me through Katie at katieforrba.com. I would love to hear from you. Would be happy to meet with any of you. When I became a teacher, my principal one time asked me at an observation, why are you doing this for your students? And that question has stuck with me ever since. And she told me that if I couldn't answer that question, I probably shouldn't be doing what I was doing. And so I hope that you will hold me to that and ask me, why am I doing what I'm doing for our students? Because that's what's important. Thank you.
Thank you, Katie. Just see someone trying to get into the building, so Spencer let them in. We're always so lucky to have people willing to step forward and run. At the same time, we owe a great deal of gratitude and thanks to Mariah White for the service she did, coming in during COVID, immediately, dealing with the protest, and then also Fox burning. So she has been, I think, an incredibly committed school board member. I hope everyone reaches out to her and thanks her for her service, because 4 years on school board, she was very impactful, and that is a hard assignment. So thank you to Mariah, and thank you, Katie, for stepping forward. All right, thank you. Well, we will now move to Delegate Ray Cousins. Ray, thank you so much for coming with us. You've been a wonderful representative already. If you could just tell us a little bit about what you'll be working on next session and take some questions.
Thank you so much for having me. Happy to be here with you all. Again, my name is Ray Cousins. I represent the 79th District, which is located obviously here in the city of Richmond, but I cover some parts of Northside, east of Chamberlain. One precinct in the 2nd District is within the 79th, and that is Carver. And then I also represent Churchill, Fulton, and then Manchester over to Forest Hill Park. So if you look at a map, it just looks like a big jigsaw puzzle piece in the middle of the city. But I am a 4th generation Richmonder, so 4th generation of my family to live here in the city. I grew up in Churchill, currently live in Northside. My mom is a retired Richmond public school teacher. She taught at George Mason, which is now Henry Marsh, for 35 years. My dad had a long career in workforce development with the state. He also did some affordable housing advocacy work in Jackson Ward in the 80s and 90s. Janice, you might be familiar with Freddie Ray and Cassandra, so that's who I grew up around. And so just grew up seeing public service, and that is what inspired me to become an attorney, and then also to ultimately run for the House of Delegates. So it has been the honor of my lifetime to represent the communities that raised me. I completed my first legislative session this year, 2024. We had a 60-day session, which apparently is a long session, which seemed way too short. And I introduced 17 bills, passed 10 through the General Assembly. Governor Youngkin signed 3 of those into law, so I'm just happy to have something that he signed. But I'm happy to serve, proud to serve in the most diverse legislature that we've ever had in the history of the Commonwealth, with the first Black Speaker of the House in Virginia's 405-year history, with the most women legislators we've ever had, the most mothers. And we've already seen the work that we can do. We introduced legislation to increase the minimum wage, to also require paid sick and family leave. Unfortunately, the governor vetoed those bills, but we will be bringing those back and working on those again. I specifically worked on getting more funding for K-12 public education here in the city by changing the way that we calculate the at-risk add-on to get additional funding to localities that have a large population of low-income students. I also did some housing, introduced some housing bills to address our eviction crisis here in Richmond, to protect tenants, some criminal justice reform work. Also, 2 of the bills that the governor signed dealt with food insecurity. So one bill requires the Virginia Department of Education to establish a farm-to-school task force to figure out how we can leverage relationships with Virginia farmers and our agriculture sector to get nutritional school meals to our students. And then also introduced a bill to address food insecurity on college campuses, which the governor also signed. And lastly, did some work in the criminal justice reform space and also maternal health, gathering more data to determine, in particular, why Black women are dying at disproportionately higher rates during pregnancy and childbirth. So I am just, looking forward to continuing that work again in the General Assembly in 2025. I did want to point out 3 constitutional amendments that passed the Privileges and Elections Committee in the House of Delegates last week. One is to protect reproductive freedom here in Virginia. We also passed a constitutional amendment that will restore voting rights for returning citizens. And then a 3rd constitutional amendment that will protect marriage equality. Every seat in the House of Delegates, 100 seats, will be up for re-election in 2025. We'll also be voting on the governor, lieutenant governor, and attorney general. Here in Virginia, for constitutional amendments to pass, they have to pass the General Assembly twice with an intervening election. So that means once we pass the amendments in 2025, we then have an election next year in November 2025 to determine the House of Delegates, the makeup of that. I'm a Democrat, so I'm hoping the Democrats keep the majority. And then in 2026, we have to pass the constitutional amendments again. If they pass, then we will all vote on them in November 2026. So this is just an important first step in passing those constitutional amendments. Julianne McFarland is here. She is my legislative aide. Yes, she deserves all the applause for keeping my office together. So we have some legislative surveys here. We'd love to hear about the issues that are important to you all, and I will take some questions if you have any. Yes.
Hey, how are you?
Good.
I just wanted to say thank you and to let everybody know here what an amazing freshman legislator you were, and the heavy lift with the at-risk add-on and the English language learner, the most impactful thing that's happened for Richmond Public Schools in decades. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Yes.
I was just gonna warm things up. But could you just give examples of things that constituents can come to you with for specific constituent needs? A lot of times, folks come to Sven and myself, and they're actually state level
Yeah, so any issue involving a state agency, we can handle and look into for you. Like any issues with like unemployment compensation, what are some other common things that we see? Medicaid, we get a lot of inquiries about that. CHR? DHR, Department of Historic Resources, yes. If there is, I'm glad you mentioned that. Because DHR is doing a lot of work to recognize the rich and complex history here in Virginia. And so they are focused more recently on recognizing historic sites by implementing markers and erecting markers that highlight African American history throughout Virginia, also women's history, Native American history. There's a whole application process, but if that's something you're interested in, it's something we can definitely assist you with. Is that it? Yes.
One question. It's like 60-something degrees out. How much does climate change factor into your work? I know that you're not, like the committees that you are on, maybe it doesn't come up much, but I'm curious how much it comes up and how much you're thinking about it.
Yeah, it definitely comes up, especially with we did a lot of really good work with the Virginia Clean Economy Act before I came in. Today, there's a historic decision. The governor pulled us out of the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, and there was a challenge against that lawsuit. And so the judge ruled today that it was unlawful for the governor to take that action. So really, happy about that work. I am actually introducing a bill in 2025 that will create a fund that oil and gas refinery companies will pay into to address natural disasters here in Virginia. So that will hopefully make them pay their fair share, considering the severe weather patterns that we're seeing, the flooding that we're seeing, intense flooding that we're seeing from the effects of climate change. So I'm hoping that'll pass, but I'm gonna work hard on it. Yes.
The House Appropriations Committee is estimating a $3 billion surplus. Are there any budget amendments we should look out for in this session?
I mean, I would love to see us fund education a little, definitely in a much larger way. JLARC JLARC is the Joint Legislative Audit Review Commission, which is a nonpartisan commission that studies certain issues here in Virginia. Last summer in July, they released a report that proved that Virginia has been underfunding schools for the last decade. I want to say it was to the tune of maybe like $4 billion. So I know we added $1 billion in public education funding this session, so would love to see some additional funding there. Yeah. Yes. In the back there.
I got a question on the school funding. Like in Richmond, I brought this up before. We have numerous schools that are open, but the school system in Richmond the population has been falling. I think the school system only has like 22,000 students, but we have numerous buildings that are open. So it's misleading to say that there's not enough money being spent in the school system. So where is all this money going? I get it, we have a lot of students that so-called, special needs or whatever, I get that. But when you have all of this mass, numerous amount of overcapacity, let's say, why do we need so many buildings open when we have such a low population? Something doesn't quite add up. I mean, it seems like there could be some efficiencies, built in where we don't need all this money. So I don't ever hear people talking about that. That's never an equation. It's all about spending more money. Where's all the money going? I never hear that. All these high schools. You go down Prince George. Prince George has one high school for that entire county. Colonial Heights, the same thing. But Richmond, we have like 5 or 6 high schools open, but we don't have that many students. So the math don't math. So I never hear people talking about that. So
So I think the conversation about consolidating schools is one that happens on the local level with your school board and with city council. But we know generally that our students here in Richmond, across the Commonwealth, in urban areas, rural areas, require a lot of support. And we also know that based on that study that I mentioned, that we have been underfunding our schools. We're pretty low on the list in terms of how we fund our students, the amount that we pay our teachers. And so it is very important that we continue to fund education. But any discussions about, school construction, school buildings, we've been here in Richmond. I know my mother attended John Marshall. It's the same building that it was back when she attended in the 70s. So we do have aging infrastructure with schools, with housing. But again, so obviously we have to address those through funding, but any conversations about consolidating schools, that's more of a local issue.
Yeah, I know, but I'm saying nobody's ever talking about it. All I'm hearing is we need more money, but there's never ever a talk about consolidating anything. You got like 5 or 6 schools for the population that we have.
Yeah, I think both can be true. And I think consolidation, those conversations happen at the local level, but I think we also know that we need to be supporting our students and teachers a lot more than we currently do with funding. Yes?
Just a quick question. So you mentioned those 3 constitutional amendments.
Mm-hmm.
So, for the second year, is there a danger of them being squashed by the governor?
Yes. Or not by the governor. So the governor does not have the power to veto the constitutional amendments at all, but the makeup of the House of Delegates will determine whether those amendments pass the second time. Yeah. So we currently, in the House of Delegates, have a Democratic majority by 2 seats. It's very slim. And so we are confident that we will get the constitutional amendments through the General Assembly. If we don't have the majority next year, there's no guarantee that any of those constitutional amendments will pass.
Okay, and I'd like your opinion on this,
Mm-hmm.
because I work in workforce development. Why is it so hard for this administration to get a good minimum wage?
I think you would have to, so in the veto statement, I think Governor Youngkin mentioned the burden on businesses, to increase their pay or wages to workers. And so I think that is probably a concern of his, anyway.
I just want to make a quick statement as far as some of those constitutional amendments. I think it's important that we, as the regular citizens, go down there and speak to speak on those, because I think what happens is that sometimes there's not enough people speaking on those, and there may be people speaking against them, and then we're wondering what happened. And so I think we need to go down there to General Assembly and make our voices heard over and over and over again. So therefore, they know that it's really a people's issue and not just our elected officials' issue, if that makes any sense whatsoever.
Oh, that makes total sense, and I'm glad you mentioned that, because I do think that we oftentimes underestimate how important our voices are at the General Assembly. And I would venture to say that when legislators hear from a large number of their constituents, either in support of or against the bill, we do see all of that. And so honestly, my colleagues would listen to you all before they would me. So it's definitely important to continue to raise your voices. If you support the constitutional amendments, definitely reach out to your legislators, state legislators across the Commonwealth to voice your support for those. For sure. Thank you. Thank you so much. And we also have our wonderful delegate Betsy Carr here. I just know there's some questions still saved up for you. But if you would like to come up and say hello and talk about maybe the few of the things you're excited about this next General Assembly that you think we might be able to get through.
Thank you. Wonderful to see you all here tonight. We have just returned from the appropriations, had a retreat, or every few years we go and tell the parts of the state to see how our money's being spent, what we're doing, how effective and efficient the programs are, and so forth. So we've just returned from a trip to Southwest Virginia. And you hear a lot about Southwest Virginia, beautiful country up there. But we also had our appropriations meeting. We had several presentations about the state of the budget. You probably read in the paper about how we're going to have a surplus. But we need to be careful with that because we don't know how long that's going to last. And a lot of that money is going toward paying for the Medicaid that we need to pay more for than we thought. And then there are people who would say, you know, before we cut taxes, we need to pay for our services, we need to pay for our education, we need to pay for health and so forth. Our meeting in Southwest Virginia was very interesting. We saw a program that was helping mental health and the women in recovery. We saw the museum, which is the between Tennessee and Virginia in Bristol, which is the birthplace of country music. Those kinds of things help our cultural institution like that, helps our citizens, our localities, and so forth. And so we had that, and then we also saw the opening of we were there about 4 days after it opened, the casino, to see what that was doing. It looks really nice right now. You know, some of us say, what's that going to be in 1 year, 4 years, and so forth. It was showing what's going on in various areas of the state. But that was a very interesting trip. This afternoon, there was a meeting of the School Safety, First Amendment Rights Committee, talking about what, the student protests that had happened at VCU, Virginia Tech, UVA. So we're beginning to have hearings about that. There had been one by the Senate, and we had one by the House today, but hearing people's voices from all the sides of trying to find what we might find out that would lead to the best policies as we're moving forward. There is one other thing I happen to be on, which is the Martin Luther King Commission, and we've done a number of things through the year, but right now they are doing a study on lynching and the number of lynchings that have happened, like in the last 100 years. It's something that was kind of covered up and we didn't know about and so forth, but that is something they're delving into. So they're all very interesting things. Right now, as Ray may have told you, it's a pretty busy time in terms of having a lot of meetings with people coming and wanting to suggest legislation. They're concerned about their businesses, their corporations, their individuals, their neighborhoods, and so forth. So it's a time where we're listening about bills that might be coming forward, and that we have to have the request for drafts done by Monday. Now, all of this about 50, all the people in the House, all the House members are limited to 15 bills. You can put in drafts for as many as you want, but when time comes down right before the session, you can only put in 15. At this present time, I have about 23. I have to whittle those down to 15. But it's all very important work, interesting hearing from citizens about what they're concerned about and so forth. I also hear that when you talk to folks generally, I think one of the things that's going to be a topic is data centers, because they're very important to the Commonwealth as far as bringing in money. On the other hand, they're going to take a lot of electricity, a lot of natural resources. Where's that going to come from? Who's going to pay for it and all that? So that's probably one of the big issues that we'll be dealing with. Be delighted to answer any questions. Yes, ma'am.
So Betsy, last year, all the bills about data centers got sort of put to the side, and
Because they were waiting for the SEC to make a
so has
decision.
that been released yet?
Almost. It's coming out, I understand, in early December.
In early December?
Mhm.
Will you let us know in your newsletter?
Yes.
So we can go-
Anything we can talk about. I was going to put in a bill that had to do with ensuring that when schools are built, their roof, not that they have to have it, but that their roofs are prepared to have solar energy. Not that they have to have it, but that they do have it. And so we're waiting on that SCC thing before, because if it doesn't come out a certain way, there's no point in our putting in that bill this year. So kind of things like that happen all the time. And you mentioned the Reggie thing, so now we can move forward with that. A lot of interesting stuff. Yes, sir.
Pleased to hear you reference the meeting today on the meeting where they addressed the student protest.
Yes, sir.
Disappointed that the design of the meeting gave the state police open access to have as much time as they wanted to have an organized presentation, but the student groups were not allowed that.
Well, one student group was, and then as
The
our
student group was not.
as our
They were only allocated time, to limited 2 or 3 minutes of time given to the general public. I hope in your position, you'll consider ways that we might be able to help the governor understand that he can't squelch public discussion, which is all that's going on.
Right.
I was there that night. The brutality is something we should not be proud of.
I heard the testimony from a lot of the students and so forth, people who participated. And as the head of the hearing today said, this is just the first meeting. So just because we had this stuff
Well,
this
it's
week,
been established for 6 months. This is the first time.
this is the first time we've met.
Yes.
There was another committee that met on the Senate side.
But the governor's mandates to universities to squelch any student conversation about that issue needs attention of the legislature.
We have some conflicts back and forth in that area. Anything else? Yes, sir.
I want to thank you for passing the polystyrene ban. And I just want to ask that you continue to push on reducing waste in our state, protecting the environment for generations.
Yes, thank you. We're always getting things about plastic and so forth. And very good. We stopped somewhere today and they gave us lunches, and you know what? They had styrofoam containers, and boy, was I upset. But other places, I go places and they're transferring. They're using the recyclable things that are not styrofoam. So I think it's happening gradually. But as you're right, we gotta continue to pay attention and keep on it. What else? Anything else? Please, yes, sir.
One way to put it is they're making dramatic changes happening at the federal level that affects Virginia in multiple different ways. Another way to put it is some states are taking steps to Trump-proof states. So far, no one's mentioned anything like that today, but it occurs to me, for example, we look for reduced funding in education, Medicaid, and other poverty programs, and yes, we need to save some of our money, for example, but these could be falling on the states, and I didn't hear.
Exactly,
Any
yeah.
more consideration down
No, we're kind of moving into, but I think people are aware of that. People are aware that we need to, and specifically what is the issue. And we will have that, excess, but the point is, are we gonna have enough to do what we need to do? And the governor's gonna want to take that and cut taxes. So, there's a possibility we just have a conflict. We said, nope, no more taxes, and he does tax, we end up with that kind of thing. I don't know what's gonna happen, but there are all kind of possibilities available. Anything else? Please stay in touch with me. Let me know how I can be helpful. If you'd like to come down to the General Assembly during the session and watch, or any way we can be helpful, you want to see it, you can always see it on television or your computer. But please do let me know if there's any way I can be helpful for you individually, for your group, or for coming and visiting us. Thank you.
Betsy, thank you so much. We really are working with our representation, and we had also invited Senator Lamont Bagby. He was unable to come, but he does great work for us as well. So just going to stay on the General Assembly for a moment longer. I want to really thank Delegate Carr and Delegate Cousins
for helping us with our demo paper from before. So some of you remember that there used to be a very nominal, just not even worth considering fine if you demolish something that you were not supposed to. I think it was $250. It's now going to be up to twice, potentially up to twice the assessed value of that structure if you demolish it without the proper paperwork. So we really appreciate you guys doing that. We have a lot of historic buildings in Richmond that deserve the proper paths when it comes to what happens to them. And then just to give everyone here a recap of what the city is proposing, hearing that, you know, our delegates can only put forward 15, and they have a lot of constituents, both individuals and organizations, cities, municipalities. We've limited ours to 4 very specific items as of right now. Understanding that things can change, we may want to try and add to this, we may want to partner with other localities or organizations, maybe get onto something that they have put forward. But our specific asks were ones that in general we ask for often, but are folks familiar with the LOOP program? That's long-term owner occupancy program. And this is just to try and help protect folks who have been in their residence for a long time and are starting to get priced out. We don't want to see that, right? So folks who are facing tax assessments that they can't keep up with, how do we honor these long-term residents of these neighborhoods and try and help them stay where they are? We are also asking for legislation to be able to add speed cameras to campuses of higher education. We have that near primary schools, so lower school, middle school, high schools, but we want to be able to say, VCU is a educational campus. We should be able to have speed cameras there as well. So just trying to use legislation that already exists, expand it a little bit so that we can get the speeding under control. We're also asking for the ability to collect all sales tax revenue from public facilities to help, again, we don't have a lot of taxable property here. To the extent that we can keep those taxes in Richmond for the things that we need to pay for, we will always be fighting for that. That's something that had existed before that was allowed to sunset, and we're saying we need to bring that back. So that's something we're advocating for. And then the last one is a budget request. Now, understanding that all of our delegates are fighting for more school funding and environmental issues and things that at a global scale are priorities, but a specific city budget request is for our combined sewer overflow, so the CSO. And that's something that the General Assembly has said you have got to upgrade to a certain cleanliness, and it's incredibly expensive. So we need $500 million in state funds to do that work. We are asking for the state to give us an additional $100 million for fiscal year 25 and $150 million in fiscal year 26 to continue implementing the plan and the good work that we've already been doing. So those are very specific city ones. We're trying to just do a few, understanding that our delegation cannot take forward every request for every municipality. And then, to the question about what are we doing at the city level in anticipation of a very different climate coming out of Washington. We're trying to learn lessons, review the lessons we learned the last time, and be nimble, not necessarily, for trying to be nimble and proactive, and we're going to take it day by day, right? But we do have terrific people in the city. We have a great community of residents and businesses that care about each other and don't want to see the climate that we've really fought hard to create here in Richmond diminished. So with that, I thought I might, still kind of on the budget discussion, invite Michael Slatz up here, Matthew Slatz up here, thank you, to give us a quick final shout out about participatory budgeting. Mayor-elect Daniel Bullock is on his way, and he will be our closing guest, but Matthew, would you like to encourage everyone one last time, if you do not know what it is, please come up here, so that those who are watching are able to hear. Thank you. And Jerome Legions is one of our ambassadors for the project.
Thank you. So the Richmond People's Budget has been in the works for several years, and it's actually started, it's been happening. So with great leadership. We always say that the process is council supported, but really community designed and community led. So it wasn't even me, who's a senior civic innovation manager with city council, like that was coming through and saying, this is how this is gonna happen. It was really led by residents like Jerome and residents from around the city. But the basic gist of the idea is that council's setting aside $3 million, we're letting residents decide how that's invested in their neighborhoods. So it goes through a rigorous process where we're collecting ideas, and then community creates proposals based on those ideas. And then you get to come back out and vote on the projects that you want to see happen in your neighborhood. So we're actually at the end of idea collection stage, coming up in like 2 weeks. So there's cards like these that you maybe have picked up. They're over there on the table. You can grab that, fill out an idea you have for making your neighborhood better. Share your name on the back, and there's some information. You can drop this off at any library, or you can go to our website, rvapb.org, and you can hit the big orange button that says participate at the top, and you can submit an idea. The great news is that, again, this is a pilot year. It's like the first time this has happened actually in Virginia. It's been going on around the world for about 30 years. But we Boston did its first cycle last year, and they only collected 1,200 ideas, and we're going to beat that. So it's really exciting. It's just a really great opportunity to hear and listen to what your needs are on your streets, and it parallels very much the work that Councilman Jordan is doing with her budget priorities that are going to be coming forward in the budget season in the spring. So get involved, let us know. We want to hear what you have to say, and yeah, so question?
How many submissions have you so far for the second district?
That's a great question. I think, I know you guys are kind of more on the top of the end of I don't know the exact number. I think as of this morning, we have officially like 1,033 ideas, and then we had we're taking these cards and doing a lot of data entry. So I know the trend on the second district has been pretty high. So, because we've had support from people like.
But we're not beating out the fifth district. The fifth district is
yeah. So.
I'm not in the fifth. I just want y'all to know.
Yeah. So you've got a few more days.
Stop filling out that card.
I'll just say too, like some examples of some things we've been hearing. I'm sure this will resonate. Sidewalks are a thing that people keep saying. We've been hearing about fixes to the Randolph Pool. We've been hearing about just kind of basic streetscaping projects, trees, water fountains at some of the parks. And all of this information that we're gathering, again, we're going to be sharing it back to you all because it is your knowledge. But we're also sharing it internally so that a process like Richmond Inspire, the master planning process with the parks, is getting this information. We're sharing it with other groups. So it's a good collaborative process that we're trying to make happen. Any other questions? Yeah. Great.
Okay, well, I will open it up to questions for me or for Sven while we wait for Dr. Volosky to come. Does anyone have any questions about things in the second district or happening at city council level? Yes.
I have a clarifying question about the LOOP initiative. Why is that a state question?
With the LOOP initiative, why we have to go to the state and we can't take care of that here.
That is, because it deals with taxes, localities, and so forth, it has to be a constitutional amendment. So, to do the loop thing, we'll have to put in a constitutional amendment. And as you heard, we already have 3 really important topics this year, so that probably won't go as a constitutional amendment this year. Looking at ways of maybe doing a study or something like that, but it'll still be in the hopper. It just won't be this year with the other constitutional amendments that are already there, and it has to do with localities and the way they do taxes.
Thank you. Often we ask for something and then we put in sort of, if we don't get this, how do we get there in the future? And so the how we get there in the future is this study, but it's important to keep asking for the actual thing that we want, otherwise people lose sight of the support for it. Thank you, that was a great question.
I say I'm on the JLARC commission, and we've put in a request to have that studied in JLARC. So if something comes out in the JLARC, that's usually kind of, not that the state legislators have anything to do with it, but they sit on a committee that listens to. JLARC has a lot of wonderful, very intelligent, very thoughtful workers who do that work. So they'll come up with a good study.
Terrific, thank you so much. And yes, that's another question.
So, you and I spoke about this before, but the Second Street Summit that I know Janice and I attended and a few other folks, is that in the city budget or is that the extra people's budget? Because it's certainly more than $200,000, the project, that all the ideas that we came up with.
Right, 100, yes, exactly. So, are people familiar with 2nd Street off of Broad Street in historic Jackson Ward?
Say yes.
Yeah, so it's got such a rich history. If you don't already know about it, please look it up. It's where the Hippodrome is, lots of really historic things that happen on that street. But it needs some love. So part of the outgrowth of Richmond 300, so the feedback from Richmond 300 was, well, what about Jackson Ward and where's our small area of study? So the planning department put together some community meetings to focus specifically on 2nd Street, called 2nd Street Summit. And the goal of those meetings is to just think really big about what could we do with the streetscape to reinvigorate it, to bring businesses back to that street, to make people more excited to come, walk, shop, eat, and occupy it, bring it back to part of its vitality. It will never take it back to its full heyday, but there is a way that we as a city can do some infrastructure engineering and investment to help that street now. So the visioning sessions were really exciting. We had all kinds of ideas. And so our office actually was talking today with the CAO about this, and we talked to the planning director, I think it was Monday, they had an event, we were able to talk to Kevin Blunt. So we have put in a placeholder. We would like to see in this upcoming budget money set aside. We don't know what the final design is going to be like, right? So, but there'll be a range. And we want to make sure that when the community has finished doing its work, there's actually money there ready to implement it. Now, I wouldn't not submit that to the people's budget. Let's put those requests in as many places as possible, because it also elevates the support for those investments. So things like maybe widening the sidewalks for outdoor dining, more trees, lighting, and taking over so many of the alleys potentially to make them more pedestrian friendly. So it was a great project, and our office is 100% committed to when the community finds out what it wants and what it supports, how we make sure the money's there. So thank you for that question. And I think there will be a lot of overlap on the, hopefully, we'll be finding money, whether it's in the people's budget for things that have been suggested or in the city budget. And then there's always funding request for we have great folks who know how to reach out to our business corporate partners and individuals for funding. And then some of our neighborhood associations are also good opportunities for smaller scale projects. All right, any other questions for me? Jerome?
It's not a question, but before you guys leave, I'm going to do another shameless plug. Inspired, there's a QR code, so you might want to. The city's actually putting together the master plan for parks, recreative parks. So you may want to QR code that and give them your ideas.
100%. This is something that I heard as a need when I first got on council. The master plan for our parks, I think the last time it was done was in the 70s. Our city has changed a lot since then. So if you haven't participated in that survey yet, please take advantage of it. There's, if you forget and you get down to outside, there's also a yard sign outside that you can use QR code there. And I know the city hits you with a lot of public engagement opportunities. All I can say is don't grow weary. We really do use that feedback. And what you don't want to do is come to the meeting when we're voting on the final plan and say, oh, well, I have changes that, or I might feel a certain way about this section, please take the time to help us please take the time to help us represent you by giving us your input. Any other questions? This is so well timed. Okay. I would like to welcome up our mayor-elect, Daniel Bola. Thank you so much for making some time. So, Dr. Bola, we have we thanked virtually our outgoing school board member, Mariah White. We've welcomed Katie Ricard, who gave a little overview of why she ran and what she's hoping to accomplish in the next 4 years. We heard great legislative updates from Delegate Carr and Delegate Cousins. And we had Matthew Slats giving us a final push reminder for the participatory budget. And now I'd just like to say congratulations again. Seems like a long time since we were all at Dogwood, or many of us here were at Dogwood for that mayor's panel. Just welcome you to say hello again and maybe share some things that you heard from the 2nd District as you were out hitting the campaign trail and what you're excited about for the next 4 years.
Thank you, Catherine. So great to be here tonight. Sorry I'm a little late. I was at a Richmond Region tourism event because the work has started, like immediately. The day after Election Day, I was with Mayor Stoney. I've been super grateful to the current administration for the way that they have started to really like shepherd transition and be really thoughtful about preparing, of having our, whatever our fledgling team is at this point, getting us ready for transition. We spent all day last Thursday and Friday meeting with all of the portfolios, the department directors, trying to get a sense of, what are the major issues. And so I will tell you, I tell everybody who asks, running for office has been rough. Thankfully, I've had amazing champions like Catherine and Betsy and Ray and so many others who have been so helpful and given so much advice and been so supportive along the way. But there's something about spending every day, raising money and trying to promote yourself and trying to separate yourself from other candidates that has just felt really unnatural. But this work of governing and of building teams and of really trying to figure out how we're going to solve problems together has been really exciting. So I've been super energized these last couple of weeks, really excited to get into the work. I think we are in a stage of really trying to figure out, as I said along the campaign trail, the work at the beginning of this is really assessing the current leadership and making sure that we've got a team of people who really buy into a culture of reorganizing City Hall to be ultra focused on the customer, to be really responsive to the residents that we exist to serve. And so we are in that work now. We're starting the work of doing that assessment department by department. We have formed an amazing transition team of community leaders, a couple of whom I see in this room. Thank you all so much for serving. And so that will be the work for the next few weeks, both identifying many of the priorities that emerge during the campaign. Some of those are big categories like affordable housing and how are we going to invest in Richmond public schools. And others are very specific, like exploring a grocery store on the south side, or how are we going to improve the process of getting a business license in the city. And so we've formed about close to 20 teams to really dig into some of those issues to help me and the new administration really hit the ground running when we join in January. But it has been a really, really energizing experience. Happy, I don't know where we are time-wise, happy to take questions, if that's okay.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
Hi, I just typed out. First of all, congratulations.
Thank you.
I'm proud to cast my vote for you. So I love local government, and Richmond's the only strong mayor government in the state. So with that, I have a two-parter question. The first is, what is your plan for balancing power and establishing a good relationship between the mayor's office and the city council office? And the second is, how do you plan to support city staff and respect their expertise in their engagement with city council?
Such great questions. Thank you for that. The first is how, as mayor, because we're the only strong mayor system, are we going? Sorry, did anyone hear her? Do I need to repeat the questions? Okay, smart, great. I think the relationship between mayor and council is absolutely the thing that needs to be worked on. You know, I think the last administration did a decent job. I think the previous administrations, it was very contentious, right? There was a clear line between, it was a lot of just conflict between the mayor's office and city council. And as I often said along the campaign trail, the mayor gets 0 votes on city council. And so the job of the mayor is to really build consensus, to build a relationship with those council members, to make sure that we're communicating well, that I'm listening well to Catherine's concerns for her constituents and all the other 8 council members, and that I'm communicating what our priorities are for the city and hoping that we can like really align around those priorities, because ultimately council gets to decide on what that budget is going to look like, and the budget is a reflection of the priorities that the people of Richmond have elevated. So I think the relational work between the mayor and council is of utmost importance. It's how I'm actually spending a huge part of my time getting ready for this, right? I've already met with 4 of the school board members and 3 of the city council members. My calendar for the next 2 weeks is really focused on making sure I get face-to-face time with school board and incoming school board and incoming city council, and then learning from the folks who are outgoing off of council as well. The second part of your question is how I'm going to honor the expertise that exists with the city. I was with a group last night, and they asked me the question, what's been the most surprising thing that you've learned during transition? And I would say it's not, just having spent 2 days meeting with the portfolios, meeting with the directors, hearing what folks are working on. It's not surprising because I was in it, right? I was the health director and I was part of the leadership team of the city, but it was such a great reminder of like the incredible people we have working in City Hall. And so I think so much of what this job is coming in is to honor and respect the expertise, and then also to look at what are the systems and processes that are not working? What are the ways that the city is set up that are not serving people well? And I would say much less often that's going to be a people issue, right? There's probably some things that we need to work out in terms of a customer service orientation or things that we need to build accountability around. Much more often, this is going to be about systems and process. Like how are we investing in technology so that people can interact with City Hall in a way that is easy and convenient? How are we making sure, so let's take the building permitting process as an example. That came up over and over and over along the campaign trail. And I will say that Kevin Vaught, the director of planning and of PDR, has done a great job of redesigning some of that process because he's listened to a lot of folks who have applied for permits and to developers. The problem is that the process doesn't stop with PDR, right? Like that requires DPU and DPW and fire to all sign off on. And so things get lost in the black hole of intra-departmental coordination. And so I think part of the role and expertise and experience that I can bring to this is actually thinking about how are we focusing on the end user, and then really thinking about both technology that will facilitate that, but then also just the pieces of our process so that things don't get lost. So that, I think, your point is that there are so many great people in City Hall, and I've been really encouraged by that. And know that, as an organizational leader, my intent is not to come in and flip all the chairs, right? It is to figure out how do we support people who are there for the right reasons and doing good work, and make sure that we're really investing in them so that they can serve the people of Richmond that they signed up to serve for. Yeah.
Ask a quick follow-up question.
Please.
So, we do have, some key vacancies currently, one of them being economic development director. To what extent, at this point of your transition work, have you been engaged in what type of person EDA is looking for?
Yeah, there's a couple of structural questions around that. So right now we have an economic development department of people within City Hall, and an EDA that's a separate authority that has no staff but kind of use the city staff. So one question, and you and I should have much more conversation about this, but one question is should we just port over that EDA staff into the Economic Development Authority, or is there a benefit to having them be classified Richmond City employees? As I've talked to both of the EDA directors of Henrico and Chesterfield, and they have really different setups, which gives them some freedoms and flexibilities, and I'm still learning what the pros and cons of that scenario are. So that would be step one, is figuring out what is the structure of the EDA that best supports the EDA to do the work that it can do. And then I think once we've nailed that down, I think that opens the door to making sure that we're recruiting for a permanent economic development director. You know, I met the acting gentleman, he seems wonderful, but I think there's clearly, we'll go through a search process and make sure that we get the best talent available. Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
I'm very happy that you're mayor-elect. I have a question. So could you define your idea of affordable housing?
Yeah.
And what you plan to do, because there's a group of people who are employed that fall somewhere between low income and affordable housing, and they're out of everything.
Yeah.
And there's no place for them to live other than coming to shelters, and they're employed coming to shelters now, or coming into other types of programs. So what is your plan?
Yeah.
Or what are you investigating and with who?
Yeah, so this is definitely like one of the priorities of our transition team. We've pulled together a couple of folks, Javon Burton, who runs the Partnership for Housing Affordability regionally, and Greta Harris, who many of you know, who runs the Better Housing Coalition. They will pull together experts both in the private and nonprofit housing sectors to help accelerate our step into the administration. The way that we've been thinking and talking about this is recognizing that our first priority really should be to protect long-term residents from displacement, right? We've seen, I mean, even my own experience, I've lived in the East End and Churchill for 20 years, and when I moved into that community, we had like generational residents, right? 4th and 5th generation people who had just had so much history in that community, and because of the boom that's happened in Churchill over the last 7 to 8 years, we've seen just the property tax assessments get to a point where folks on fixed income can't keep up with it and they've got to move, or they don't have access to capital to fix things like roofs, and so they've got to leave. And so I think we absolutely need to focus on protecting long-term residents on fixed income. So I think there's policy solutions that we need to look at in terms of, if you meet a certain income threshold and you're on a fixed income and you've lived in a place for a certain amount of time, capping property taxes or providing a tax rebate. The Stony administration actually has just forwarded a grant program that will do some of that. I think we need to really expand that to make sure that we can keep long-term residents in their community. The second part of this is just about housing production, right? I mean, part of the reason that we've seen such an increase in property tax assessments and rental rates is because post-COVID especially, people from New York and DC and really all over the country have moved here because it is way more affordable than other communities. But that influx and that demand has created pressure to push rental rates up. And so there is a basic supply-demand issue that we've got to address. Something like certainly as a city, but also as a region. Like we're not going to be able to solve this on our own. And so I'm really grateful for the work of the regional Partnership for Housing Affordability and even the investments that the regional partners have made in affordable housing. And then there's the element of what are we doing to subsidize housing for lower income folks. Typically, we think of these in buckets according to something called area median income. And so we think of workforce housing as 80 to 120% of AMI. There are programs that the Stony administration has recently put into place to help city residents. I don't think it's expanded to teachers yet, but that's something that's being discussed. But to be able to offer down payment assistance, for example, to residents in the city so that people can live in the community that they serve. I think those are really important, right? Like we want to invest in that community. And we just know that we need more workforce housing. I've talked to a number of affordable housing developers who, with both good architecture and engineering, partnership with the Maggie Walker Land Trust, and then partnership with DHCD to find new funding streams, can take a house that would sell at market rate at $600,000, can bring cost to $350,000, and then with subsidy can drop that to about $240,000. And so I think there are ways that we bring these funding streams together to actually create affordable home ownership, which is a huge issue. I mean, we need to do more rental, but we also need to make sure that there are people who have like a vested interest in their community and can buy a house and start to grow a family. And so there's a lot of facets to affordable housing. And then I haven't even talked about sort of the 60% and below, which is a really challenging community to support, and particularly the 30% below that live in public housing largely. Public housing, I'm pretty concerned. Our public housing stock needs a lot of help, and I'm not sure that the federal funding is going to be on the way. And so it's something I've just reached out to the head of RHA today. We're going to get together next week, and so it's something we've got to get our arms around. It's way more money than a locality can actually come up with to invest in affordable housing. And so again, I would look to regional strategies and then our advocacy at the federal level to make sure that we can start to invest in the rebuilding of ideally deconcentrated public housing, right? One-to-one replacement, but not all in the same neighborhood like we've seen for the last 70 years.
So, I know that there's a lot of tax incentives for the developers. I've met with some of them.
Yeah.
Just to educate myself, because I have put a lot of people into housing. And, I asked them, what would it cost to give up a couple of apartments in each building that you develop? And it was very disturbing to listen to, profit rate and investors and nothing about people.
Yeah.
And so if we can't get them to give up apartments, is there any way that you could get developers to feel for the community and have them?
Big ask.
I still believe in this. I
Yeah.
still believe. I'm a believer.
Yeah.
Is there any way of getting them to contribute? And I know other localities have done this, mostly on the West Coast, I
Yeah.
think, where they contribute for every building that they build, a percentage into a community fund that then the locality divvies out for rental assistance and things of that nature. If they're getting so much out of it and making so much of a profit, I think we should ask them to give a little bit back to the community.
Yeah, no, it's a great suggestion, and we're super open to a lot of these different solutions. I will say, I've spent a lot of time talking to developers, both on the affordable housing side, but also on the for-profit side. And I will say there are people, even in the for-profit world, who are like, hey, this is the margin that I need to make. This is the cost of construction. This is the cost it takes to borrow money to actually fund a project. And so one of the things that I want us to do more as a city is to really think about that equation for developers. Because if we have access to money that we can offer, let's say at a 3% interest rate loan, that's half of what they could get out on the open market. And we can actually start to help them build a capital stack that helps them develop, help shrink the overall cost of a project. And I just don't know that we've been sophisticated enough about brokering those deals. And so that's something I'm very interested in building the talent within our housing department and our economic development department and making sure that those two entities are working more closely together. Sure.
Yes, congratulations also. I understand, maybe I'm making this up, but I think that Mayor Stoney declared Richmond to be a recovery city. Is it too early to talk about what that's going to look like under your administration?
I don't know the answer to that. It's all right. I just haven't caught up on that. Yeah. Do you want to give me a little bit more
Are you talking about
context?
Recovery?
No, it's actually sort of like when people kind of come here, and so they may be from some other place, and they're sort of ending up on the streets for the most part, and then they can have access to certain services to help them make it through, to help them get off the streets into housing. So we're supposed to be a recovery city.
Okay. It's not come up in our transition conversations, but Catherine, anything you know about that? Or?
That came from the administrative side, and to be honest, it was in the last sort of throes of campaign season. And
Okay.
I remember making that statement, but I haven't heard what the real implication is.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's follow up. Yes, sir.
So this is not a new problem, but I was reminded how significant it is when I accompanied some out-of-town guests on a tour of Richmond, and we drove down Broad Street, and I, with pride, pointed out all the great things that are happening on Broad Street, and we come to this block that I'm sure you're very familiar with, that has 12 abandoned buildings covered with graffiti, and my out-of-town guest goes, oh, that's really attenuated. There's this neglect of the building that nobody's using, and I go, oh, those buildings aren't neglected, they're owned by a developer who has plenty of money. He just believes they'll be worth more money in 10 years.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, a horrendous eyesore, and you're familiar with that.
Yeah,
There are
absolutely.
buildings, but that one collection on Broad Street is especially an eyesore. I assume there some options that other cities have used through tax structures.
Yeah.
There was some discussion in the campaign, but what are your thoughts on a way to address that?
Yeah, when all of the candidates actually did a walking tour of Broad Street with Venture Richmond and the Chamber to look at that block and the other blocks. You're right, yeah, there are.
The eyesore of several
Yeah.
buildings in one block.
So those couple blocks, many of those buildings are owned by a DC developer. I think step one is for me to just go up and have a meeting and say, and really try to compel him to do something and figure out like what is the conversation about him either turning over or the city buying or making it available for other entities to purchase. Step two is really using our lever of code enforcement, right? I don't know how effective we've been in really getting after some of the code enforcement, the code violations that a lot of those, broken windows and people squatting, and so I think there's an approach there where we hold the owner accountable to keep the property up to a certain standard. Another thing that has come up more recently, and Catherine might have to weigh in on this, but the concept, Andres Addison brought up the concept of land value tax, a mechanism in which to really elevate taxes on the property, which would incentivize a developer to actually put a building on it or to do something with it so that the finances are more favorable. And I think that's absolutely worth looking at. I mean, there's a lot of details that make that work for some people and not work for others. And so I think we gotta be careful about that consideration.
Have had success with it. It's so complex, it's
Yeah.
kind of hard to get political will behind.
Yeah, but I do think code enforcement is one particular strategy that we can apply to keep pressure. I mean, when I was health director for both Richmond and Henrico, it's one of the things I saw the county do particularly well. When there were negligent landlords, so think about Essex Village, St. Luke's now, Glenwood Farms in Eastern Henrico. These were two massive, low-income communities owned by an out-of-state developer who just wasn't doing their job as a landlord, and the county went after him and applied pressure, and ultimately both of those owners put those properties into receivership and were bought by other entities. So I think there is pressure that we can apply to make it more likely that they do something with it or give it up. In the back, yeah, Janine.
Hi, on that note about development, and it keeps coming up, and I think we understand the supply demand, we understand the profit motivation, and so forth and so on, but none of that, to some points, talks about the human factor. And so ultimately, they are living dwellings for living people. And so will, under your administration, the city, and you spoke about this a little bit, but I'd like you to say more, will the city have in the conversations with developers that our values as a city has this sense of humanity in it? I mean, we understand development and the economics and all of that. However, at the same time, it's more than just the profit motivation.
Yeah, that's right.
And to lay that out in the welcome package for developers, and maybe we'll get some different kinds of proposals from them.
Yeah, it's a great concept, and I think I can certainly pledge that I will, as I sit down with developers, I'll make sure that our housing department does as well. And at the end of the day, I think maybe you're right. There are developers who will give up a little bit more because we make a really strong, humanitarian appeal. Sometimes it may take more investment or incentive on our part, and we'll just have to work through that negotiation. And if there are developers who are more inclined that way, and I've met some, right? I mean, I think there are people who really believe in the mission of what they're doing. I think that those are going to be preferred developers for us. Yeah, I appreciate you saying that. Yeah.
So Sin just gave us a time check, out of respect for the Parks and Rec staff. We can probably take one or two more questions, but we need to be walking out probably around 8:30. So, please go ahead.
Yes, sir.
So while we're talking about developers and conflict management, this is what it really breaks down to.
Yeah.
Much of the arguments that I see when I go through community organization efforts is that the GIS system sometimes is misleading to the developers as well as to the
different community organizations, the historic districts, and the mapping may not coincide with what the community actually believes themselves to be. And so there are so many occasions where where a developer would come and make a presentation, and he would say, well, I'm just using the city GIS. And when we go look at the city GIS, it's in conflict with what the community organizations believe themselves to be. So is there a way for your administration to look into the possibility of maybe coordinating with community groups, historic districts, and actual neighborhoods so that the boundaries can be more generously and honestly representative of what they are?
Yeah, I'd love to have a follow-up conversation on just like specific details of like what GIS mapping is faulty. Like I just need to understand the data question better. But the bigger question is really about community engagement and community input. And I will say, you know, in all of my roles of leadership, like that has been such a hallmark of just what I've been committed to. You know, when I was public health director, it was so crucial to have the voices of residents that we were trying to improve health outcomes for be involved in the prioritization of our investments. We, you know, built a network of clinics throughout all of the public housing communities in the city, and we did it after many, many months of talking to, engaging residents, understanding what their priorities were for their community, ultimately hiring many of those residents as community health workers to work in our satellite health clinics. And so just know that a huge priority for me in the way that we operate as a local government is to open the doors to that kind of conversation. I think part of that starts by having me and others on the team show up at meetings like this. Part of it is building a deeper infrastructure. You know, a lot of folks have been in my ear about the teams concept, sort of the structure of neighborhood associations and representation that existed pre-2004. Super open to revisiting that and figuring out what is the present day model of that really ensures that people have access and make sure that their voice are weighed in the decisions that your government is making. So I appreciate you.
And it would be very helpful for the developers not to get themselves into trouble before
Yeah.
they arrive.
Yeah, that's good.
Thank you. Congratulations.
Thank you, sir. All right, I think that's it. Great deal. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Danny. And yeah, I brought up the EDA question because we do have a lot of small businesses, and Sin and I were with the Downtown Neighbor Association today, and just really thinking about that next leader, not just having perhaps, you know, an experience in bringing in businesses to Richmond, but what are they doing to help our businesses here now thrive, survive, grow? So anyway, I just want to make sure I looked up that comment since it didn't come from the audience tonight, as well as our amazing arts district. But this was a wonderful conversation, and I know we will welcome you back as often as you will come enjoy us. We have room for one more question. According to Sven. Sven, did you have a question? Okay, so for those who are watching this later on YouTube, if Dr. Bull, if you could speak a little bit to your role in the changing landscape of our national leadership. What to expect. Thank you.
It's good for now.
What's that?
It's good for now.
Okay, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think, you know, it has been ultra clear that there are a number of our residents, many people in our city who are concerned of different aspects of what's happening at the federal level. Thinking about what happens to funding streams that have supported climate change and sustainability, right? And the concern that those are really going to disappear. It's going to require us to band together as a local community to see what relationships that we can build at the state level and try to draw down state funding. But it is going to mean that we're going to have to figure out how to invest more locally to do that. I think we're all concerned about an assault on freedoms, reproductive rights, immigrant protection. And so these are things that we have identified as our in our transition team. So we have a transition team that is committed just to the immigrant experience and immigrant protections. So we're actually, don't know if we sent the press release out today or maybe it's coming out tomorrow, but Tanya Gonzalez, who some of you may know, who runs Sacred Heart Center on the South Side, Olivier Fay, who represents a lot of the African immigrant communities, and then Claire Gassiniaga, who served many years at the ACLU, but is an attorney who will help really define what policy options do we have in a potential changing federal landscape to make sure that Richmonders are protected. Similarly, we have a group that is really focused on healthcare access and reproductive healthcare access. And so again, what can we do? How do we anticipate what's going to happen at the federal level? And what can we do at the local level to ensure that we are protecting access? So that's some of the preparation that we're doing to make sure that we're bringing some of the city's best thinkers and getting us ready to jump in January. But yeah, there's going to be a lot of movement afoot, and we will need to both be paying attention, listening well, and preparing for how we can support the people who live here in the city.
Thank you so much, Dr. Bula. And just for me personally, like when I chose to run for a second term, there are things that I wanted to finish. I wanted to see Fox reopened. I wanted to see the Diamond District taking shape in the stadium opening. I wanted to see Broad Street coming back. I wanted to see Jackson Ward getting its planning actualized. But I tell you what, when President Trump won, it gave a whole different sense of purpose to what I was doing. And your local leaders, your state leaders, your regional leaders, we are thinking about this, we are talking about it, and we're acting on it. So we trust and believe that this is on our minds and it's giving us purpose, and we are here for you. So not every question is one that individual may want to ask out loud or in a forum like this. You can always come to us. Please come to us, and we are here to help and support during this time. And it's also here to help you with your trash can issues. So it's really, truly a pleasure to serve. I'm excited about the next 4 years. And let's give Sven a round of applause because I know I have the best leader.